It's currently really hard for me to write a talk in this space that is not just a book report of Accelerate. I'm going to assume you've all read Accelerate by now, but if you have a shameful secret that you don't want to disclose, please just go buy it and read it, because all of the rest of this conference will make so much more sense once you've read it. So if you missed yesterday's keynote from Jez and Dave, you should catch up on that too, because I was watching it, I'm like, they've stolen half my keynote, and then the panel this morning half my talk, and the panel this morning took like another half. Fortunately, there was some overlap, so there's a little space for my stuff to exist. But I have to tell you, I think it's really exciting that all of us are talking on themes and addressing topics in a similar way, because it tells me we're converging on some good answers. And I'm really excited about that, because we've had a lot of questions for a lot of years. Are you going to play? It's not going to play? OK. Here we go. Yeah, there we go. So freeways are meant to reduce the friction and psychological expense of driving, because we're just going one place and we're just getting off at the place that we know we need to get off, and we don't have to think about stoplights or cars coming from other directions very much. This is driving through Seattle, and I thought this was representative of what a freeway experience is like. So you can go faster on a freeway than a residential street because there are fewer unexpected things. They are straight and gently curved, they're wide and well lit. Freeways, except for the speed, are sort of the easy mode of driving. But what if I put you in a car and told you that you had to drive on the freeway without touching the steering wheel until you got to your exit? Would you feel comfortable about that? Because we're going to get to some Mercer curves, and yeah. I wouldn't feel comfortable with that. I would say I want some control between my start and my destination. OK, what if I promised you that this car had a map, and it knew about the curves in the freeway, and it was going to go ahead and curve where it needed to curve? Would you feel better? A little bit, not much. You're still thinking, like, sometimes assholes don't tie down their load and it falls off, and sometimes people cut me off and I need to like steer or brake. I need to be able to react. That one place by Boeing Field where you are in the ruts that the trucks make and it gets hydroplaney every time it rains, yeah, I commuted from Kent to Seattle for a long time. You want to be able to steer out of that. So all of these things are things that you don't think about how much you touch your steering wheel when you're driving on a freeway. You think, I'm going a place, there are no turns. Our release processes are like driving. I want to be able to touch the steering wheel and do minor corrections for lane drift, for other cars, for events, for maybe, I don't know, technology changes before I get to the next exit. Because otherwise, I don't feel like I'm in control of my process. OK, I don't get that GIF. I want you to imagine, oh, there we go, OK. So the other problem is oversteering. This is exactly what I look like when I'm playing Mario Kart. This is not actually me, but it's definitely representative, because you get really excited about something and you lean into it really heavily, and all of a sudden, boom! You have run into a wall. You have run into another wall. Your Mario Kart is now severely damaged. You have run into a wall. This is what it's like for me playing video games, because I'm really not very good at them as much as I love them. I managed to crash in Stardew Valley, which is a significant accomplishment because there isn't really a metric for that. But it turns out that if you are as bad at bedtime in Stardew Valley as you are in real life, and you're me, sometimes you'll just fall over in the middle of, say, a mine, hypothetically. So when I say I don't want to oversteer, I'm saying it turns out that it's actually very hard to find that line between understeering and oversteering. So I'm here to talk to you about continuous integration and progressive delivery, right? So why am I making the conference Wi-Fi play animations? Because I know that we learn better by analogy than we do by direct knowledge. We can really only learn things if we can build off something that we already know. There's an entire field of educational research about how people learn things, and I've done tiny little dabbles in it, but it's probably more than many of you have done. And I'm going to tell you, we learn by analogy. So when I first read Accelerate, the thing that I started telling people was that it's like teaching a kid to ride a bike. You say to the kid, or your parents say to you, if you go fast enough, you won't fall down. And the kid, who knows what falling down feels like, but does not know what fast enough feels like, is like, that seems like a terrible idea. I'm like, please fling yourself at the pavement fast enough. It'll be fine. I mean, it won't be fine the first few times. You're going to fall anyway, but it'll be fine. I don't use that analogy anymore because it doesn't work in Europe because they are less terrible to their children and teach them on Strider bikes. And you don't fall down because you're just using your feet and not trying to pedal. But the thing remains, like this physical fear of going fast is built into us. And until we figure out how to get over our fear of falling down or of crashing, we're not going to be able to go fast enough. I was discussing this talk with my friend who is a legit air traffic controller. I have the best friends. It's great. So she says that the thing to remember, the thing she always tells her trainees, and she's been doing training for this for 10 years, is that air traffic control is a fraud, a sham, and an illusion. That it is a shared hallucination, and it only works if everybody believes in it. This is the ATC center where she works. This is ZMP in Minneapolis. There are traffic control centers at airports, but the really high-level air traffic control centers are actually far away from airports, and they're routing the planes across the country. They are the ones who do the handoff from Seattle to Denver to Minneapolis to Chicago. They're doing such high-level math that you cannot even imagine it, and they're doing it in their heads because that's what they've been trained to do. It's amazing. But it's still a sham, a fraud, and a hallucination. And the number one thing that she tells her trainees is that she will answer their questions as many times as they want, no matter how stupid they are, as long as they never look stupid in front of the planes. Never look stupid in front of the planes, because the minute a pilot feels like ATC doesn't know what they're doing, they start making their own decisions. And their decisions don't include all the knowledge that ATC has. They are trying to optimize for themselves, not flying into things. ATC is trying to optimize for everybody not flying into things. It's a different perspective. And although it's frightening for a pilot to feel like somebody else is in control, they're pretty much used to it as long as they have faith that the ATC knows what they're doing. This is the equivalent of every outage that you've ever had that wasn't customer facing. You know that incident you have that is like Sev1, but it's not Pry1 because nobody else can see it, but you're down? We had an incident where we lost Google Suite entirely. It's remarkably easy to delete just your entire Google Suite installation. So we couldn't send or receive email or manage our AWS account, but we kept ticking because it didn't actually touch any of production. Someday I'm writing that whole story up. It's going to be great. So what's happening is every time you don't look stupid in front of the planes, but you still have a problem, that's what happens when you've got something that goes wrong in QA or acceptance testing. It's so much better to look stupid to a trusted person than make the outside world question your competence. If you want to tour an air traffic control center, you can. I didn't know this. There are open tours. You want an air route traffic control center. So that's not the tower, that's not the airport, it's the one that's further out of the city. I think the one here may be in Long Beach. So if this is all about fear, we have to figure out what we're scared of. We can't go faster if we're scared. When I'm driving a Mario Kart, I drive really slowly because I know I'm going to run into things. I'm like, if I go slowly enough, I'll be able to make that curve. I'm scared of walls. I'm also scared of walls when I'm driving cars, but I have more experience doing it, mostly. So being scared is the imagination killer. Like, there's a bunch of psychological research that says if you're stressed out, if you're scared, you cannot do creative thinking because you are focused on survival. So you're not going to think about the novel thing. You're going to think about, like, how do I make it through this thing? Change that comes with fear is change that gets avoided. Tiffany Longworth has a great talk called Change Management for Humans, where she talks about the fact that people are scared and need to be sort of talked through change and told that it's going to be okay and here's what we're going for. And I think it's really important when we talk about all the change that we want to execute as part of our CI/CD transformation that we acknowledge we are scaring people, that we acknowledge it is frightening to change something that mostly works. We can't stop being scared until we know what we're scared of. So what are we scared of? We're scared of failure. This is a desk chair in an MRI machine. Metal. There's a reason they make you take all your earrings out when you go have an MRI, and this is why. So we're scared of looking stupid in front of planes or in front of each other. And we're scared of releasing things that don't work or break, or best, don't work and break. So when my ATC friend was in training, the trainers used to kick the chairs of trainees when they made mistakes. This is called aversive conditioning. It is the same instinct that leads people to beat dogs for pooping on the floor and yell at children for making mistakes. It is not a really effective training method. There are some things you can do with aversive conditioning that stick for life, but it's not necessarily a great idea. This aversive conditioning, kicking the chairs, is actually a step up from where ATC started, which involved hitting people on the head when they screwed up. They've moved past these methods because they realized that you can't be creative about how to route a plane if you're scared somebody's going to hit you. You can't be creative if you're scared. One of the things that we're also scared of is stasis. It leads to a lack of imagination, and if you're afraid your metaphorical chair is going to get kicked for making a mistake, you avoid risks, and risks are where we keep most of the interesting ideas. But we're also scared of not doing things. Nothing in our world has encouraged us to believe that coasting is an option. We have to keep moving, like a shark. We have to keep moving. We can't rest on our laurels. So when Pink Fong had a global breakout hit, Baby Shark. See, I knew I could get one of you to do it. I can find the parents in the audience, and I've now earwormed you for the day. You thought you were safe, but no, Baby Shark. We know that we need to keep moving. And so we're scared of not doing anything, but we're also scared of doing new things. That's kind of a bind, isn't it? So what are we going to do? Well, let's think about this. Related to both failure and stasis, we are scared of getting beaten. We can be driving our track just fine, and some Wario asshole comes up, passes us on our right, and drops the bomb on us, and we can't do anything about it because he's moving faster than we are, and also he's got a bomb thrower. Like, what is going on? So we are scared of getting beaten. So we combine that with our fear of stasis and our fear of change, and it's amazing we can do anything, honestly, because we are this conflicting mass of anxiety. What we need is psychological safety. Psychological safety is the feeling that on your team, no one is going to kick your chair, no one is going to hit your head, no one is going to hit you with a rolled up newspaper. I can't make you physically safe, but I can talk to you about psychological safety. Google showed that top performing teams get that way not because they have amazing developers, but because people feel safe in their team, which includes some key points for discussion. Psychologically safe people feel like it's not the end of the world if they are imperfect, need to ask a question, don't understand, make a mistake. This scales from the individual to the team to the company. A good manager can do their best to build a safe environment for a team, but if a company is going to fire people for outages, good manager doesn't matter. It's not actually a safe place. So what makes something safe? You are all tired of hearing this. What makes it safe is blameless. It needs to be understood, and I'm using the passive voice very clearly. It needs to be understood that humans do the best they can in every circumstance. And when they fail, it is not just because they are human, but because the circumstance, the situation, the setup has led them to a place that they cannot recover from. I have this pillow, and I am sometimes compelled to hold it up to my wife because I have said something really just tactless while I'm hungry. And I'm like, I'm sorry. It is my fault I didn't eat, but it is also like a blood sugar problem that I said that thing. I don't actually believe that when I'm well fed. And I think that idea of like, we all say inaccurate, hurtful things when we are hungry and cranky and tired is a way to frame how we're dealing with our teams. Like, we're not trying to fuck up. Nobody is here, nobody shows up at work and it's like, I wonder how I can take down prod today. It's gonna be a good day. Unless they're QA, in which case that is totally their job and we should hire them to do it because if they take down prod, we know what happened and we can fix it. All right, it's also non-catastrophic. The reason people get fired for outages is because sometimes outages cost millions and millions of dollars. I haven't been able to pay my kids lunch money for 2 weeks because a system called PayPams is down. I would like to know what the PayPams people are doing because it's not very effective at recovery. I'm like, you could have built a new payment system by now. You could have bought a new payment system by now. I just want to pay my kids lunch money. How are you still down? But the thing that we need for a culture that is just and equitable and not scary is that we need the mistakes to be non-catastrophic. We need to be able to flag something off. We need to be able to roll it back easily. We need to be able to recover in a hurry. One of the ways we do that is chaos engineering because then we know how to recover in a hurry. One of the ways we do that is QA because then we know what can go wrong. And one of the ways we do that is how we design our infrastructure because then we can figure out how to make it non-catastrophic when, not if, when something goes out. And lastly, we need to be curious. Like, a really good culture is curious. You can't be curious when you're scared because you're thinking about survival, but the best part of feeling safe is having room to be creative and curious. Why did that happen that way? What about the system caused that? Is there some kind of like dark debt where there's an inbound connection and an outbound connection? I couldn't tell that these things were going to interact. I'm curious. This is really where the observability people are making their money. They're saying, you need to be able to ask a question that you didn't know you had until you had this problem. You need to be able to ask a question without having been able to prepare for the answer. Curiosity is what drives us to both better solutions and better fixes in the moment when we're having trouble. My wife used to do tech support at a university, and she had this great story about a monitor that gave one of her users all sorts of trouble. It went out intermittently, but it never made sense on a technical level, and even replacing the monitor didn't fix it. She finally got the idea to walk around the office and see what was going on. I'm curious, what is it? Like, do you have a potted plant on the monitor? You've all heard that story, right? Like the monitor kept going out because somebody kept a plant on top of it and watered it on the regular. A famous tech support story goes with my coffee holder is broken. Yeah, see, now I know how old all of you are. But it turns out there was an electron microscope on the other side of the wall. And so when the electron microscope fired up, the CRT monitor had a lot of problems. But you would never find that out if you were just like diagnosing by rote, and you would never find this in an ordinary office environment because we don't keep electron microscopes around most of the time. So the only way you're going to find it is by being curious about what's happening. So how does going faster help us be safer? I've just talked about how we need to feel safe, but I haven't said how going faster is going to help us do that. I drive a car at a normal speed because I have a lot of practice. I have unconscious competence. I drive a video game car either very slowly so I stay on track or very fast with catastrophic consequences. Poomp! How does going fast in software help us be safer and feel safer? Well, fast and safe both have very specific definitions here. Fast is continually integrating and testing and maybe deploying. I care less about your deployment than I do about the fact that you're merging things in all the time. Deployment is important. I'm not saying it's not, but I'm saying it's not useful to deploy something that hasn't changed in the last 10 minutes. So if you're not making continual integrations, your deployment speed matters less. It's not waiting for long release cycles or major revisions, at least internally. Going fast is sometimes hard on the release side. Like at LaunchDarkly, we talk about decoupling deployment and release. I want you to be able to put stuff on the server whenever you want it. I want you to be able to release it whenever business wants it. Release is a business choice. Release is a thing that we do to make money. And sometimes it's really important not to release often. For instance, it costs millions and millions of dollars every time Microsoft Word changes its interface because the US Army needs to go and retrain everybody in where all of their buttons are. Like, you know that moment when your buttons move and you're like, I don't know how to do this anymore, I've lost the plot? Yeah, so somebody retrained someone in all of those interface changes. I used to work with a company that did screen scraping for Medicare. Not for Medicare, of Medicare. It was actually questionably ethical. I quit when I was asked to plagiarize the AMA. They have some really scary lawyers. But the thing that nobody understood was the people using the software liked the green screens. Those women in the back office of your doctor's office, they are super fast at like the whole healthcare system, and they do not want to use a mouse. That is like 100% not what they need. If you deploy changes to them every day in a SaaS-like way, they are nothing but mad. They are nothing but mad because you are messing with their tab flow and they know how to do this and you've messed with their competence. So when we're thinking about continuous deployment, I think we need to say really clearly we don't necessarily mean continuous release. We don't necessarily mean that people have to see this change every day, every 15 minutes. We just need to get it out on the server so we can test it. Safe is about making sure that changes do not cause harm and ideally add value. And that means we need to have everything instrumented. We don't actually know if people are using new features if we don't have instrumentation on it. If you add a new feature and nobody comes, was it a good use of money? It was not. So safe means that we need to make sure that we're not breaking people, and it means that we need to make sure that we're adding value. And if we can do those two things, then we can go fast and be safe with psychological safety. So what we're doing to do this is smaller deltas, smaller bets. You ever play penny slots? Yeah, maybe. You ever lose like $1,000 on penny slots? No, because you're making very small bets. Now, if you were playing $100 slots, it would be super easy to lose that much money. So when we're doing technology choices, what we want to do is very, very small bets. I think today's code is good. I think this function I wrote is good. Like, not even this feature, not even this sub-feature. Like, I think this function is good. I'm going to put it in and test it. That's the level of thinking that we need to get to. Because the smaller our delta, the smaller the bet, the less money we lose. Course correction. Again, with the driving, I would rather nudge the steering wheel rather than have to crank it all the way over at the last minute. Like, I see something coming up in the road, I think I'll switch lanes. No emergency. I see something coming up in the road and I don't switch lanes. Big emergency. And I might have to like jerk the wheel over, and then the person behind me didn't know I was going to do that, and then it's like the catastrophic collision. I drive in Minnesota where it is icy a lot. And the defensive driving in Minnesota means that you're like, I'm going to go slow. and make changes a long way ahead of time, and not do anything abruptly, because abrupt movements mean you lose traction. So, course correction, small, minor, small bets. Answer honest questions. I think we need to be able to say, is this working? Is this working for business? Is this working for IT? Is this working for ops? Is this working for development? We need to ask ourselves questions about what is working. All right. So, yesterday, today, and the future. I want to go faster and safer, but where are we coming from? Because that's really going to inform where we're going. Agile's goal was to move faster and deliver the user what they wanted within living memory of having asked for it. If you remember shrink-wrap software, that was not actually a goal that they had. They're like, yeah, Windows 95. We've been working on it for 3 years now. It's going to be awesome. Yep. You don't remember what you asked for, but we're going to give it to you. DevOps' goal was to unite product and delivery so that producing software didn't bankrupt us, and to respond to the gaps that a solely user-focused organization had found. It turns out Agile really, really sucks if you're an ops person, because the wall throwing is epic. They're like, it's not even software, it's just stories. I just wrote a bunch of stories. Make it work. Continuous progressive delivery's goal is to get users what they want on budget within a reasonable time while knowing what happens afterwards. It's a big ask. It's a lot. I think we can do it, but we're going to need a miracle. The discussion after Brian's talk yesterday was awesome, and they stole my line. Because we talked about our tool ecosystems, our goals, and of course, my favorite, documentation. Like, obviously, everyone at this conference knows I care a ton about documentation. We have almost all the tools that we need for our miracle, but we don't have them fully implemented, or they don't all work together. But it's within reach. This conference is about figuring out how to make a narrative out of all of these isolated parts. So, if this was too long and you read Twitter instead of listening to me, if you want to release often, make it safer and less scary. Smaller bets, better course correction, go faster. It's going to work out. And if you would like to learn more about why I care so much about feature flags, you can take a picture of this slide. We will send you a t-shirt, because I refuse to cart t-shirts around. And you can sign up for a free trial of Launch Darkly. Thank you all.
So one of the challenges that I'm having is my immediate team, we actually are successfully ship every 2 weeks to enterprise on-prem customers. And that has dramatically increased our psychological safety in the team, because it means that we can react very quickly. If we do ship a bug, nobody's afraid of that, because we can ship a fix within hours. The challenge that I'm having is taking our other product that is definitely not shipping every 2 weeks, it's shipping every 6 months, and convincing that team that the culture that we've developed on the team that I'm working on is something that they should aspire to. And there's a lot of fear on that team to be able to do that. In fact, they've come back and said, well, the fastest we can go is 3 months. And I'm like, that's nowhere near good enough. So, we're trying to show the other teams how much better it is in this world, and how much safer it is for them. And I have no idea how to do that.
Take the 3 months.
I mean, we are going to take 3 months, absolutely.
Yeah,
but it's not good enough.
Little by little helps
Right.
coming with SAP in the works. It's also 6 months. 3 months is a goal that they're trying to strive towards. So it's a real thing. Yeah.
I'm wondering, it's just a guess. What if you just say, okay, guys, 3 months, that's a goal, and we're gonna operate in this mode, or you're gonna operate because it's their team, right? In this mode, and then maybe we take some time to see what tools we can share, and maybe 3 months becomes like 2 months. Maybe it becomes like just different YAMLs, but all the tooling is actually shared, parameterization and stuff. Maybe you can build some, code that validates parameters in a way that's like polymorphically reusable across teams, and then people, we benefit from what these guys are doing, and at some point maybe you will benefit from what they're doing. So maybe it's like an evolution that you need to just let it go. I have this problem as well. Sometimes I see things that are, man, they are so obvious. How can you not see it? But it takes time for actually things to become obvious across the board.
I find that sometimes I have to go in with a personal touch, and so I walk over to the person who's having the issue or pushing back, and I sit down and I have a conversation. And I start off with like, "How's your day going?" And I chat with them for a little bit so that they know that like I'm a human too. And then we start talking about where they're coming from, and then I start talking about where I'm coming from, and it's a longer conversation than they probably want when if they knew they were signing up for them, but I'm in their face and I'm smiling. And then we get through the part that why they're hesitant on these things, and I get some understanding of what they're doing, and they feel safer and more secure with me because they now have a person that they can go to in a friendly face, and then they stop by more often, and it breaks down that molds, and they need it. They don't know that they need it, but that's okay. I am happy to go over and say, "Hi, I'm Cora."
I would like to ask a question about, in terms of psychological safety. There was a point about like the concept of blame, and of course I don't want to be blamed, and I do my best to avoid it. I expect it from others. I sometimes have difficulty, and I can see it, especially when there are multiple teams working. Somebody seems to be doing better job than the others. How to actually, like, is it counting till 10 so that you don't blame others? Because like sometimes it feels like super objective that people just repeat the same mistake. They don't read all the books that are recognized by the communities, and they really don't want to learn. So I feel really hard about like how can this not be blamed?
So, on that same subject, it's also a challenge from a leadership perspective to balance between ownership and accountability and a blameless culture, right? So within the team, it absolutely needs to be blameless, but when you have ownership over the services and accountability for those services, it can be a real challenge to try and balance between those.
I saw somebody on Twitter, which is now totally unattributed, say that one of the things they did about that was have everybody go around in a weekly meeting and talk about their biggest mistake that week. Everybody, including the managers.
So I'm going to switch the discussion a little bit because I gave a talk related to psychological safety, and the interesting concept to me is that people have different prices to pay for admitting mistakes, right? Someone who's a white male in the leadership position might not pay the same price as a woman who's a person of color in an IC position, right? And this is hard work that we have to do to enable people to speak up. And one of the ways to do this is to have leadership to admit to mistakes publicly. But I'm interested in everyone's opinion on that.
I think to add to that, part of it is approaching people with saying like, here are ways that I see that we can grow, rather than saying like, hey, why are you messing this up? Like it's a difference in tone of like approaching it from like, how can we grow this? How can we develop this? This is a place you are unskilled. This is a place you have maladaptive practices, behaviors. Like, how can we work through that and move towards a thing rather than like just saying like, this is wrong?
And I think one of the ways that we need to do that is ask the question that is basically, are you hungry? In a workplace sense, like you are resisting for a reason. And the reason makes sense to you. So I need to understand that context and that reason so that I can help you with it.
One of the, I don't know if to call this a challenge, but close. One of the things I really liked from the talk was actually like saying there's a difference between continuous deployment and continuous release. That is something we have struggled a lot with at our org, and it's something we're going to continue to struggle with. but it was kind of nice to hear that validated as like a jumping off point of trying to explain what we're aiming for.
So what successes have you had in this area, if any?
I think like little successes, but like reasonable amount of TDD really helps. Like I personally, even though our team has a lot of freedom about how doing things, I have a lot of psychological safety knowing that every time I'm fixing a bug, first I make sure that there is a failing unit test. And that gives me a proof that I actually fixed the bug. Maybe not 100%, but it's certain level. And then spending, like, when I give estimates to my manager, I don't throw like 1 day, 2 day, like most of my colleagues I know do. I'm saying it's gonna take a week because it's gonna be a little bit of development, significant amount of testing coverage, some good amount of spent writing documentation, and then in the end, I know that the things that I made today, they are protected by all the investment I made yesterday, because there will be validation along the way to make sure that configuration is not broken if people made just a typo. Reasonable things are validated. Unit tests are covering it. Higher level tests are covering. So that's my kind of convenient spot that gives me my psychological safety. What doesn't give me psychological safety is that when other people are not playing by the same rules.
So I honestly think, like, not in particular us, but I think the industry is recognizing the importance of psychological safety, and the Google study is getting cited a lot. And, you know, I'm also going to school, and they cite, you know, you should tell people about mistakes. It used to actually be a big problem. Like, people would actually argue that you should never talk about your mistakes, and you should seem perfection to your, you know, to your teams and stuff. So it's really good that we're recognizing that it's important.
So I come at this from, well, I don't know, to me an interesting perspective. I have an outdoor leadership and summer camp background, so think like challenge courses, that kind of thing. And so psychological safety is something we deal with a lot in that context. And something that stood out to me, I'm not sure which one of you spawned the thought, is that in that context, we work with a concept of sequencing. So if I'm going to put a group through a challenge, like I want them to have a couple early successes, but then I want them to fail. I don't want them to fail last, because that's just mean and they don't want to come back, right? But you need the group to fail sort of really visually and very obviously, so that the group then learns that failure is okay and that they know how to recover from it. And then from there, you can sequence them into a bigger challenge, and then a bigger challenge, and then maybe they fail at that bigger challenge, and they learn that, okay, the sky didn't fall, we're all still alive and breathing. So that bit about like exposing your, talking, really just capturing your failures and making them known, and then taking that moment to say, oh, I guess we didn't die after all. Like, we're all still here. It's okay. We're good. Is super important.
Kind of an extension of that, from a product manager's perspective, and also to extend what I was talking about earlier. One of the things that we decided really on as a product team is when we do ship every 2 weeks, that it gives us the ability to fix things really quickly. At first, when we first started proposing this, all the engineers were like, we're going to ship bugs to customers. Like, what are you doing? You can't do this. I'm like, no, it's okay. We are going to ship bugs to customers. Like, that is going to happen, especially more at first. And of course it did, but then the customers didn't fire us. And we could fix it within hours, not weeks, not months. And that made them be able to fail and see that they could recover from that failure really quickly. And it was the speed itself that provided the ability to recover that quickly. And that made everybody feel safer about being able to like do more things, try more experiments, and that really increased our velocity quite a bit. One other thing that I got a lot of success in is working with the team to absolve us from authority. And rather we work on expertise. So there are experts on the team. There are experts on design, experts on the customer, experts on architecture, but no one has the authority to say that another person needs to do this do things a certain way. And instead, we all rely on just trusting each person's expertise. That's provided a lot of autonomy and increased collaboration, far more than the other team I've seen.
So on that same point, from a leadership perspective, I also believe that it's really important to make sure that the team is self-forming and that they're able to adjust within the team. So they have a whole slew of RCA meetings that they'll do on their own to make sure that what happened, what went wrong, there's no issues with having the manager tell them what they should have done better, but across themselves, they can hold each other accountable and improve that process without feeling that they're going to be reprimanded for that. So, well, go ahead.
It sounds like the subject of accountability that I think you're bringing it second time is actually quite important. So maybe it also belongs on some of the slides.
So what would you want to see in 2 to 5 years? That could be probably within your own group, within your own organization, or possibly across the industry as a whole.
What I would love to see is a lot of these wins that we're seeing at the team level be stretched up to the org level. I work with a lot of huge organizations with dozens and dozens of IT operations teams that is usually does operate on fear. And I would love to see a culture that takes kind of the things that we're talking about at the team level and really scaling it up to the entire organization and kind of have more of a top-down approach. I don't really know what that looks like, but I look forward to seeing it.
I'm probably going to articulate this very badly, but like internally we have a lot of struggle with having to do root cause analyses, but like from a very success and support oriented side, and such that we have to tell customers like one thing happened because of X, and so that process kind of implicitly leads toward a sense of blame internally, even if it's not exposed towards customers. And so if I could just wave a wand, it would be that those just go away in some way and we can get everyone on the same page.
So I think you mentioned something that's important is learning from experience. So some of these skills, you can't teach them by just telling people to do something. So no matter how many times you say you should be blameless, people are not going to become blameless. So both experiencing failure, admitting mistake, and stuff like that, we should probably start teaching that in practice rather than just theory.
Yeah, the idea I'm having around that actually is that there are these tools that exist in other industries that do this kind of debrief and psychological safety work, whether it's the military, whether it's outdoor leadership, whether it's whatever those contexts, and how many of those of us that have connections into those other industries or know people who work in air traffic control or whatever, can we reach into those industries and take stuff that could work for us? Be interesting to see that cross-pollination happening.
Yeah, I know personally I'm a big Agile advocate and everything, and there's big promotion for psychological safety, but not a lot of tools on how to actually incorporate that on the day-to-day or on the sprint by sprint, or how leadership helps to encourage that and build that into the process so that teams can hold each other accountable. They can make an attempt towards something, have a failure, and have a way to recover with that on a short basis.
I would like to see in 2 to 5 years have this be part of assessment of leadership and of individual contributors on like how much are you putting into the psychological safety and how much are you taking out? Because I've been on teams where there is one person who brings that negativity into the room. It is hard to shut that down. It is so hard. It is easier to bring out people who are just neutral or like negative and bring them up into like a good conversation, or just to teach them about the tech so they can bring it on, than to bring in someone who's an expert in something but they bring this negativity in there, and it's such a poison. You get a little drop in and it poisons a lot, and it's a lot of work. And recognizing that would be great.
And I want to see more tooling that makes it possible to experiment safely. I think that a lot of the things that we want to try are interesting, and we can't do it because we don't want to break prod. So I want better ways to not break prod, but be testing in prod, to be in the world, experiencing the full weirdness of production, because no staging server is ever going to have all of the connections and all of like the AWS buckets. It is not feasible in our world to do a full staging repo. So I want to make it less frightening to test in prod.
I would like to add the point that from the engineering side, that makes perfect sense, but also we mentioned leadership, so maybe there should be, like I can imagine that good leaders could also, they keep sending us some emails all the time, and maybe one of those emails could be done on a quarterly basis saying, this is the things that we didn't do very well, and these are the lessons that we learned. And you just, leaders are the leaders because we learn from them, we follow their example, right? And if our performance review forms will include points like, there's like, oh, success here, success there, I did this, that, and then, okay, what you think was not very well this last season, and what was your lesson? How did you address this problem? What were the conflicts that you were able to solve? I think this will be like the framework where, whether you want it or not, you will have to think about it.
Yeah, I know personally that I can create some short-term periods where it's very easy to create opportunity for failure, POCs being built, things can fail and go wrong. But then when you get to the actual live production and trying to build that service to scale and meet a schedule and try and hit a deadline, that's when you have trouble trying to balance between. So in the long term, I would love to see that start getting embedded in our timelines and in our projections to start allowing for near production, have a failure happen, and push that date out and have a conversation about the risk that we're handing off if we try and meet that deadline and do that last push for development that causes more problems rather than help.
It's like the last ski run of the day. That's where you always get hurt. Maybe you shouldn't.
Or is it like you always find something in the last place you look for it? We stop when we fail or when we succeed, like when we reach a terminal point. We don't keep looking for our glasses after we find them because we know where they are. So the last ski run of the day is where you get hurt, or we might have gone in another one if we were okay. So I want us to keep thinking about alternatives, because if we keep being creative, I think we're going to make more interesting things.
Plus, if you're ever on target, they're always going to add one more feature on. Okay, so one more round of applause for Heidi Waterhouse. And for all of you that participated in the discussion as well. Thank you very much.